Victoria Garrett, and for the last 8 years now I've had my reassignment surgery and I am fully female. I'm a real girl now. And currently working in information governance, specifically in data protection, relating to subject access requests, access to patient records, things like that. And I've been working there for almost a year now. With the pandemic, it has been a bit more difficult. We've been socially isolating in the office and at times socially isolating in different offices to each other. It's the isolation part, I think, has been the hardest. I'm used to working in an office with loads of people. I worked previously in BSO and payroll, and they have massive open planned offices, so you've maybe 30 or 40 people or more on one floor. So being used to that and then coming down to where you maybe have to work in an office on your own, it's a bit daunting, but I've hopefully managed to make it work. My manager will be able to tell you better, but I'm hoping that I've been able to make it work. Pride itself, I would need to tell you a wee bit more about my background for that. Before my transition, I came out as a trans woman when I was 30. I'm now 44 in a few weeks' time. So before that, I came out as a gay man. So I was on the Belfast gay scene from the age of about 17, 18. I performed as a drag queen for about 13 years, I think it was, before I decided the transition was the way to go for me. I have been really, really lucky. I've had full support of my family. I have amazing friends. And whenever I decided on this career route within the health service, I've had varying degrees of support. Starting off in payroll, I tended to notice that it was at that time, and we're talking probably about 8-9 years ago now, and at that time it was still fairly masculine environment. So for me to come into that, I'm somebody who's not going to shy away and stand in the background. Whenever I arrive at a workplace, if it's my first day, I'll introduce myself to a supervisor, manager, take them to the side and explain, look, I was born male, I'm now female. It's constantly, it's going to be she. I will identify as she, but I don't like the thought of maybe someone who has known me for years coming into my work environment and maybe making some of my work colleagues feel uncomfortable because they didn't know. So my closest work colleagues will always know. I've had a few online trolls, as they're now called. Back then there was a different name for them that I couldn't mention on camera. But because of that, it just made me want to include the people that I work closely with. I don't ever want anybody to feel as uncomfortable or as pressurized as I have been. On that note, I had again the full support of my work colleagues. Within payroll, the managers were fantastic, although one of the managers I worked under wasn't quite sure whether he was going to treat me as one of the boys or one of the girls. So every time I opened my mouth to say anything or join in a joke, he just went bright red with embarrassment because he was never quite sure what way to take me. By the time I was leaving, I'd worked my way up to a band 4, and all that was sort of way put aside, but I could still make him cringe. I always kept that little bit of power just in case. Yeah, that would have been the only negative side, was that it was fairly masculine, and a lot of the other women who worked with me at the time said the same, even though when I went to payroll, the person in charge was a lady, a lovely woman that I still keep in contact with, but she had a struggle even then, and she was band 8. I moved from there just to be closer to home because I'm also my mum's carer. So to be closer to home, I moved up to Knockbracken. I moved to the Belfast Trust, so full-time Belfast Trust staff member, and I worked with the home care meds team, and that would be over at Knockbracken Clinic. And again there, when I moved in, it was a much smaller team. There was only about 7 or 8, and I did say to my manager and the supervisor, I'd taken them aside and said, look, this is who and what I am. You have given me this job, thank you very much for the opportunity, but I just wanted to let you know, and again explain to them why I wanted to let them know, and that I was happy and content to talk about it, and it did come up a few times in the office with the other staff members, my colleagues, and I'm more than happy to explain to them, go into as much or as little detail as they want. And some of the details I went into with one colleague in particular, yeah. But I will only go as far as they are comfortable with. I can usually, haven't been a performer for years. I have performed the last 5 Glastonbury festivals, and I have performed now over 25 gay prides in Belfast. That's not including Dublin, Manchester, London and a few others. But I can normally read a room, and from people's reaction when I would start with something and say, well yeah, I have my name, I would start something simple like I have my name changed 10 years ago. And from that, the reaction you get from different people in the room will tell you how comfortable somebody is talking about it. Whether they'd be more comfortable maybe talking on a one-to-one or talking in a group. And for me, when I was going through my transition, I was all about break down taboos, break down stereotypes. And and still am quite happy to talk to anybody. I've given newspaper interviews. I was on Newsline a few years ago talking about transphobic hate crime. I was told I was the first trans woman in the history of Belfast law courts to take a case from reporting it right through to prosecution, and even further than that, the courts rang me after the case was done and the guy was prosecuted and given a sentence. They asked me what I think his punishment should be. And when they said he had, by the courts, he had been given so many hours of counselling, and they asked me my opinion on what I thought he should be counselled on. So I've had so much experience of different things, so much life experience of different things, and because I've been supported, I'm quite happy to support other people, to break down barriers, to talk to anybody, whether it's Band 1 or whether it's Michael McBride, who I did sit at a table at a conference with and had a very good conversation with him before I even knew who the man was. It was a conference in Le Mans, and I was asked to be a guest speaker at it. And I sat down at this table, and this gentleman sat beside me, and I was like, oh hello, you're Victoria, you're here with, and I said, oh yes, and we sat and we chatted for about 5 minutes, and the lady who had invited me there then sat down and said, oh Victoria, you've already met Michael McBride, and I'm like, you're Michael McBride, and suddenly pennies started dropping, but so I can and I'm quite happy talking to everybody and anybody right across a range of subjects and a range of backgrounds. If it'll dispel myths. I've had so many people coming up to me and going, oh well, you've changed to be a woman, so obviously you're going to be a straight woman. And I'm like, well yes, I am. But please don't confuse sexual orientation with your gender identity. Those are 2 completely different things. And there are friends of mine who have transitioned either from male to female or female to male, and when they've transitioned, the new gender identity they have, they are now homosexuals. So it's distinguishing between those 2, which I think can be very hard for people at times. And then when non-gender, non-binary and genderqueer, when that comes in as well, that just adds to the confusion. And I think sort of a lot of people are scared to ask. They're actually scared to say, to approach someone and say, look, I'm sorry, are you, you're presenting maybe an address, you're presenting to my eyes as female, do I address you as female? And instead of asking, they just assume. And assumption, there was a fabulous film quote that I won't quote right now because there's some language in it, but it's assumption is the mother of all mess ups. And I think don't make assumptions, ask. Nobody is going to tear your head off or scream at you for asking a simple question that's going to stop offence happening. I think it's just, the rule of thumb for me for years would have been, and this is just me personally, my rule of thumb would have been, if someone presents to you as female, you address them as female. If they present to you as male, you address them as male. Whenever non-binary now comes into the mix, I think the best and only rule of thumb is ask. And that way no offence can be caused, no offence can be taken. You didn't know, you've asked the question. Anywhere I've worked within the health service, one thing keeps coming up every single time, and that is there is no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know and somebody else does, you find out. It's as simple as that, and it makes life so much easier and so much more pleasant for everybody, especially in a working environment. A lot of trans people that I have spoken to are not shy, but they're not as extrovert as someone like me. Very few are as extrovert as someone like me. But a lot of them just want to go about their day-to-day business, be who they are, no confrontation. But a lot of people who are in the press or who are making waves seem to be larger than life, seem to be constantly on the attack, and therefore people are less likely to want to approach them. But rather than just go, well, why is this person on the attack? Is this person on the attack because somebody didn't say to them, look, by the way, how do I address you? If somebody at the start of a day had said, do I address you as they or as he or she? By the end of the day, that person would have been much happier rather than be on the defensive. So ask the question. As soon as you think of the question, you don't know the answer, ask it. And that saves so much more complication further down the line.
Brilliant, brilliant. And those people who, obviously our theme this year is allyship, what does it mean to you to have an ally, or what does that support, what does that mean to you?
It means the world to me. It really does. When I was performing as a drag queen, I used to try and instill a wee bit of sort of history of LGBTQ plus into anybody who performed with me. The likes of the Stonewall riots, Transgender Day of Remembrance, things like that mean a lot. And the fact that at Stonewall, a lot of the people who were maimed and seriously injured or killed, those people on the front line, the first ones out through the door of the Stonewall Inn to create that barrier were trans. They were either drag queens or transgender. They were the first people, so the trans community is such a strong community. I look back on that and think, God, we were the ones there sort of standing shoulder to shoulder going, you're not getting past us. And yes, there was the lesbian, gay, bi and what have you were there and joined in too, but those first steps were taken by somebody who was trans. And that makes me so proud to be who I am and what I am, and to know that people have taken those first steps to allow me to do what I have done and to be who I am, to be me. And without that history, and then more recently then would be the support of my friends, family, work colleagues, and I had a terrific support network. Even my counsellor at the Gender Identity Clinic, who I still see now and again, she lives near me, and I still have that support ongoing, whether it's because of my personality or what, I don't know, but I'm so grateful for it, and it means that I can go and try and help support other people, which I have done. I have given talks, I've sat down one-on-one with people. When I was performing still on the scene as a drag queen and started my transition, I remember so many nights sitting beside somebody in the corner, drink in hand, and they're going, but this is the way I feel, and this is my story, and this is what I'm doing. And I'd be like, well, okay, I can relate to that, and sort of trying to give them advice on, look, I'm not an expert in this, I can only tell you my own perspective, but this is maybe what you should consider doing. You know, go and speak to a professional, speak to a GP, get the ball rolling. Even if it's not, if it turns out it's not your direction that you're going to go, at least you'll have explored it. You'll have asked that question. Again, it comes back to ask the question from the start. Don't let confusion and myths and legends and stuff, don't let that cloud it. Ask the question. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, Gay Pride, well, as with any festival or celebration, has fallen a bit by the wayside. 2020 was a horrific year. 2021 now starting to build on that a wee bit and trying to do something to show that yes, Belfast Pride is still there, yes, people are still proud to be who they are. I know that around at Custom House Square this year, they had a get together. It was a very, very muted parade, and I was very fortunate to be asked by a friend of mine to perform at the Fountain Bar. It was fantastic. The first time I performed in about 2.5 years, so very nervous. I had the microphone in my hand waiting to get up on stage, and my hands started shaking, and a friend of mine hit me a nudge, and I don't recommend alcohol, but hit me a nudge, handed me a shot and said, down that and get up there, you'll be fine. But I did. I had the most wonderful time, and to see everybody enjoying themselves, and they were maintaining the social distancing and everything, even out on the street. And I had 2 20-minute sets to do. I think I ended up doing a full hour, but that's just me. And I just had a whale of a time doing it. It was so much fun. And I did, in the middle of the set, because there were a few mentions to be made, the guy who was organising it had a few people he wanted to mention that couldn't be there. And me being me, and being proud of being a Belfast Trust member, I did say that on the microphone. I give a shout out to anybody who works not just for the Belfast Trust but for the health service, or anybody who would be a family member of them, and that they are doing an absolutely amazing job, and explain this came from a place of positivity, because I work for myself for the Belfast Trust, and I just see so many people out there, doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, that do an amazing job. I know the likes of myself who do admin, we work in the background, and they say our job is special too, but it's nothing compared to the amazing work the frontline workers are doing. So I wanted to do that at Gay Pride as well. It was my first chance with a big audience to give a shout out and give a massive thumbs up to everybody who's working so hard through this.